But first, I'd like to introduce our reactors for today and invite them to turn on their webcams. Thank you. Joining us is Denise Henrikson. She is from the Social Policy Research Associates, where she collaborates to develop training and technical assistance tools for workforce system partners.
Hello, thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Denise. Terrific. Thanks, everybody. It's really great to see all the interest here in the topic. And while social policy research doesn't have an active social media presence, a lot of the groups that we do, and one that I wanted to talk about in particular is we're working on a project right now to increase participation in apprenticeship programs by veterans with service-connected disabilities. And one of the ways that has been really effective for recruiting applicants for that program is through social media, and not only the agencies themselves, but the partnering organizations, sponsoring organizations, and businesses. And to get the word out, it used to be before COVID, most of the outreach happened through job fairs and career fairs, but because that's moved online, there's been this increase in ways to spread the word about it. That's really had a positive impact on the people who are accessing that information and able to apply for those programs. So social media has been a really great tool, and like Katya and Hope were talking about, there's not just the agency or the particular organization that has the opportunity, but there's all the partnering organizations that can help amplify that. And that's been a really effective strategy.
Definitely, the leveraging and amplifying is definitely a strategy that Hope and Katya spoke about, and it is important. I'd like to get to one question from a participant pretty quickly. I think you, Katya, and Hope were able to address most of those, but one question that came in is, can these strategies be applied to research using social media, such as research projects when they define their questions of the research that they'll do or collecting data? Can you see how crowdsourcing can be used in those sorts of projects?
Is that question for me?
For Hope or Katya.
Okay, thank you.
I can jump in.
Okay.
So one of all right, you can go, Katya, if you had something to say.
I was just going to say, I think, I'm sorry about that. I'm unmuting the wrong thing, but yeah, I think it's very applicable. I mean, I'm not sure if we were clear in communicating that, but it's really, you know, for research, I mean, you're defining a problem, you're coming up with your research question. I mean, even starting with crowdsourcing your research question, right? You know, in research, you're collecting information from individuals. So, you know, how do you collect that information with them? It's just using a tool to do that in a different way, and allowing others to be part of that, you know, of that process as well. I think, you know, I hope we're talking a little bit about surveying. Surveying is definitely a, you know, common strategy in research where you're just pulling feedback, but this is more than just a one-way input. I mean, this is where you're really trying to have a little bit more of a conversation, a little bit more in-depth, you know, engagement with the person. And I think in research, it's very easily applicable. I wish I could come up with a quick example of that, but Hope.
Well, I was thinking we have done a bunch of different types of dialogues, and one of the kinds we've done is identifying barriers. Right? So where does the problem lie? So, I mean, I think in terms of framing your research question, you know, where are the pain points? So we've done a lot of dialogue, kind of not knowing exactly, you know, knowing there's a problem, but not knowing exactly where it is or how to frame it. So we've done several where we've done more of like a gap analysis. Where's the problem?
Definitely, that's a great example there. I'd like to invite the other reactors. Erica Machulak, she's the founder of Hikma Strategies, an organization that helps scholars and specialists bring their ideas to new contexts through communication and collaboration. And our final reactor today is Jerry Smith. He's the Marketing and Business Development Manager from the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota, and Neidler grantee. So welcome both.
Thank you.
Thanks. Erica, I'll ask this question to you now. We heard about leveraging partner networks to host online dialogues. At Hikma Strategies, you help researchers share their work outside of their usual avenues through developing communication campaigns and capitalizing on existing and new collaborations. So how would you recommend using partner networks to share their research?
Well, thanks for that question, and thanks, Katya and Hope, for the wonderful presentation. I think what Katya and Hope said really resonated with me as well. When I talk to researchers about their communication strategies, I tend to emphasize three things. One is, what is the goal? What is it that you actually want to communicate and achieve by communicating? Who is the target audience, which is something that Katya talked about in the steps today. So who exactly do you want to reach out to? And then what are the channels that those people are actually using to communicate already? Where are they going for their information? So Katya had a great quote, which was, it's just not true that if you build it, they will come. You really need to meet people where they're at, which I know is something that we're talking about later. The other piece I would add to that is it's generally, many researchers use their social media kind of sporadically to post about things when they've done something and then disappear for a while. I've been guilty of that myself. You get busy, it's totally understandable. But if you really want to use social media to maintain relationships and have reciprocity with partners where you're amplifying each other's voices, it's useful to actually take advantage of the position that you have and the channels that you have to amplify the voices of your partner organizations and your stakeholders, even when you yourself don't have something in particular about your research findings to promote. So I've talked to many faculty members during COVID who had, research projects planned, and then their nonprofit or other organizational partners just didn't have capacity to pursue those things, but they were able to say, hey, our partner organization needs volunteers right now, or is doing this great community-based event, and kind of build the trust and keep the conversation going in a reciprocal way, even in those moments where you don't have a new finding that's hot off the presses.
Great, thank you. Those are great insights, Erica. Jerry, let's hear from you now. I think this question was coming in from the participants as well. When Hope and Katya spoke about the importance of research, I'd like to hear how, as the Marketing and Business Development Manager at ICI, what outreach strategies do you use to solicit feedback from stakeholders? And have you targeted your outreach to specific groups? Oh, we can't hear you, Jerry. No. Are you muted on your headset? Shoshana, do you have some advice for Jerry?
Jerry, let me chat you.
Okay.
And we'll work it out.
Definitely. We'll do this. I'll come back to you, Jerry. I saw a question come in from the chat. It's about vocational rehabilitation. Let me go back up. VR, or vocational rehabilitation, is required to perform comprehensive statewide needs assessment at least every 3 years. Have you seen any VR agencies that have used this method? And I see a few answers have come in, and I'm sorry if I'm not caught up to date. But Katya, do you have something you'd like to share with the audience as a whole?
Yeah. I actually was following up to that, but as far as our ePolicy Works dialogues, we've definitely had representatives of VR agencies participate, provide ideas, comments, vote, and also help to get the word out. As far as using crowdsourcing specifically for the VR agency, personally, I've not worked with a VR agency to do so. We have not done that through ePolicy Works or otherwise. Although it does sound like it would be a great tool for reaching stakeholders. I'm not, I definitely think that's great thinking and something that maybe some of the agencies might want to pursue. Again, understanding that budget is sometimes an issue. There are tools that are free. You just need to look into it. It's a matter of making sure that they're accessible as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It reminds me a little bit of the dialogue we did for St. Lucie County in Florida. We did some TA for a small, for a county in Florida who was looking to justify or figure out how they could do their transportation, their paratransit better. So they did like a short little dialogue, and they found they were only offering services during the week, and they found that people needed it on the weekend to go to grocery stores, to go to doctor's appointments in the evening or whatever. So they used it to try to get more grant funding for their paratransit to address some needs that weren't being addressed by their current paratransit. So similar, it was like a needs assessment just for a small community, and they did a lot of outreach to people who may not have had access. So they did it in the libraries. They put up posters in the libraries where their computers were accessible to try to get people to participate and share how they needed paratransit services.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's what happens on online conferences. But thank you, Hope and Katya. I think those were great answers. But Jerry, let's flip the switch a little bit. Go back. What strategies do you use to solicit feedback from stakeholders, and perhaps those hard to reach ones?
Yeah, and I think we've done all the traditional things. We're a busy center with 17 PIs, so there's many different projects to many different groups, and we certainly use social media. We use email campaigns. We use a lot of personal connections. We leverage our partnerships. We used to do a lot of in-person, a lot of presentations, meeting people in their communities. So in many ways, I think we did everything well, and we did it right. We were very engaged, but as COVID has shown us, we've got to get much smarter with virtual work. And I was really fascinated by this presentation because this model of crowdsourcing and having a tool to do it kind of brought everything together. We know when we're trying to reach self-advocates, for example, we use a very different approach. We embrace knowledge translation seriously and get away from a lot of text. We ensure that our content is usable and understood, but that's one audience. How to really engage, how to engage people meaningfully. I don't think we've done it in an integrated way as you have in this presentation. We just did a survey on COVID and drug support professionals. It was a survey. So it's pretty standard kind of thing. We had 9,000 people respond. It was tremendously successful, but we didn't have that kind of generating of ideas and the back and forth. It could have been much richer. So I'd like to kind of turn it back to the presenters and ask, how did you arrive at this integrated approach and find the specific tool, this idea scale, that allowed you to kind of bring together the ideation and getting information that you can analyze and then disseminate again?
So I think Hope and I can tackle this one together, but thank you, Jerry.
Yeah.
So a few different things. I think first, at the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, there definitely was the desire to reach more people with disabilities in the policymaking process, and understanding that the way it was being done was not the, you know, was not allowing for that, you know, just logistics wise, cost wise, et cetera. And, you know, and the idea of bringing the right people around the table, sort of that conversation came up at the same time. And all, you know, when virtual engagement became a, you know, a thing for the federal government and open government initiatives started. So there was definitely a look, at least for the agency, to figure out ways and utilize these tools and, you know, for inclusive policy making. I think that's always been on, you know, sort of one of the main reasons for taking this or utilizing the Idea Scale platform. And we were very lucky to begin. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, like what you said, I felt like two things came together, this vision at ODEP of a different way to do listening sessions. Instead of traveling around the country where you were only able to have a certain amount of people in the room and only included people who could physically get there. A new way of doing things, along with this whole push to make sure that all these new technologies, these new social media tools were accessible. So I give a lot of credit to Mike Reardon, who had this vision, and then meeting representatives from different technology companies who wanted help in making sure that their platforms were accessible. So Idea Scale was very open to try to help, you know, to try to have more knowledge on making sure that what they were doing was accessible to everyone. So it kind of became a partnership.
Exactly. And also, you know, in the listening sessions, one other issue with them was the one-sidedness of it, and the lack of the, like, you know, the back and forth, the conversation. And so it just sort of fell naturally into this. It was a way to have a more, you know, a conversation, a moderated conversation with thousands of people, you know, not just, you know, a few dozen. And again, even in listening sessions, that was one of the issues. It was one person at a time kind of saying what they thought, but there was no reaction coming from the federal government. This was an opportunity to kind of have that back and forth and that responsiveness. And so.
And the first dialogue that we did was a collaboration between Social Security, HHS. It was a hugely successful dialogue, and it was a bunch of different agencies working together to support youth transitioning to employment and some of the barriers that existed in federal government. So it was also it was great that the first dialogue had a lot of engagement and support throughout the federal government. So that was a really positive experience.
Right. The whole reasoning behind that dialogue was that there were 4 agencies, Social Security, HHS, Department of Labor, and Department of Education, that were supporting youth and young adults in transition. And there were redundant programs, there were inefficiencies across the funding, you know, and they were tasked with identifying those redundancies, improving inefficiencies, and better serving that population. And out of it came, you know, a whole set of recommendations, because they were really overlapping the same stakeholders. And so actually asking the stakeholders where those redundancies were and where the gaps were, and they came up with a set of recommendations that went forward. They were shared with Congress. It was. And I know they're continuing that work since 2013. It's carried over.
Can I ask one follow-up? So,
yeah.
I mean, this work makes so much sense on the scale that you're doing it too. And I would love it if Ford and GM came to one of our sessions. That would just be great. But the marketing involved in making those kind of compelling invitations has to be pretty sophisticated, I'm thinking. Is it doable that projects that maybe have, you know, a 3-year grant that are trying to reach a couple of hundred people can have the same approach and be successful? You know, can this work on a smaller scale? We know it works on a larger scale.
Definitely. And oh, I think
No, you were good. You were good. It was working.
But
Now you have to unmute.
oh gosh,
There we
yeah,
go.
I get nervous about that. I'm like, I see a little red thing. And Hope can chime in on this. We've had very small dialogues. We've had very large dialogues. I mean, we've had dialogues that have had, a dozen, maybe 20 participants. It definitely can work for smaller audiences. It's a matter of resources too. And there are all kinds of products out there that range in price that are I think that for small to large, and again there are some free tools out there as well. But yes, as far as the information and the knowledge that's created, and that it definitely can serve a small group just as much as it does a large group.
And we've done some dialogues where we invited a large group to help to come up with ideas, and then we refined them down and had people comment, a smaller group comment on the end result. Like, we come up with these 5 ideas and had people just comment and vote on those 5 ideas. So we've used it different ways. We've used it without voting. We've used it where the ideas already were put into the dialogue, and we've asked people to come in and make comments and votes on ideas that had already been pre-populated. So.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I think those are very great questions, Jerry, and answers, Katya and Hope as well. One question came in about platforms. You mentioned you use a crowdsourcing platform in Twitter, and then others are talking about Facebook. Are there other platforms that you're aware of that you see are going to be part of these online dialogues in the future?
Well, there are, I even have a list somewhere around me. Crowdsourcing has become more common, and so now there are crowdsourcing platforms for specific use. There's ones for graphic design and sort of more marketing, based to be used for that sort of.
And there's some town hall types, right, that are targeted to political events.
Right, and there's also crowdfunding, which I'm sure many of you saw, especially during COVID-19. That's crowdsourcing, but for funds, but it's all part of the crowdsourcing model. But again, as far as
the challenges, we've seen quite a bit of challenges lately as well.
Right,
where you try to pick a winner.
Exactly, pick a winner. Sometimes there's a financial prize associated with it. Sometimes there's not. There's also challenges that are developer challenges, where they're actually trying to come up with a technology, for lack of a better description, but, an app or some kind of, it's a, coder challenge. Those are very common as well. But now the challenge space has moved into just general ideas and, pilot programs. They're almost like mini grants. But as far as other, again, I hate to run through a list of them because they're almost always new ones coming up, and they're for your needs. I would just strongly recommend that you do your homework. And one of the other reasons we use Idea Scale is because they're on FedRAMP. They serve the federal government. They have mostly federal clients. So for our needs, they are able to meet the criteria for security and accessibility. And they're easy for federal and state agencies and foreign governments as well to purchase or to use. But there are lots of others. It's up to you to do some homework and read about them, check out their who's using them, their success stories, and even reach out to some of their customers to see how they like their. You can crowdsource them, basically.
Yeah. and find them where they're at as well. Figure out where your audiences, your target audiences are living and online, and go there.
Yep.
I think this has been a really wonderful discussion. We have a couple more minutes left. Jerry, Denise, or Erica, do you have any questions or final comments you'd like to share with Hope and Katya?
I've got one, if that's okay.
Sure.
Hope and Katya, I was really interested by the way that you talked about inviting moderators and facilitators and guests to your discussions, and particularly the Twitter discussions, and your note that you had kind of preset questions and a script. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you balance kind of the preparation and the organic way that the conversations develop. What does that organization look like with your guests and your facilitators?
So I guess, so when you're talking specifically about the chat, is that what your question is about?
Yeah, I suppose all of them, but the Twitter one in particular was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, obviously you want to put some structure to, all of the engagement. So that's what we really do. But as Hope mentioned, it's one of our best practices. Flexibility is definitely something that we try to have. Be instantly responsive. And you can see we can't help ourselves. Even during the presentation, we were answering questions in the chat. It's just the way we work is in real time, and just being sort of moving the conversation to where the conversation is going rather than trying to dictate it. So we do that very much with all of this. We create a shell, and the shell, is the structure of and for example, in the Twitter chats, it's Q&A. So our presenters or our featured guests are aware of the questions they'll be asked, but it's very hard to control because right away you have your Twitter sphere chiming in, they're answering the questions and they're asking additional questions, and then we kind of facilitate that conversation from the back end. And our so to date we've had awesome participants who are very much aware that that's how it works, and they're ready to respond to chat. And of course, if they're not comfortable answering something, they don't need to. But one of the things we do mention in both places is, if a question's not answered, we'll go back and answer it later. So sometimes, especially working on behalf of the federal government in collaboration with other agencies, they may not want to post a response right away, and just ensure that it is, accurate and appropriate before posting. So we'll go back and post that later as well.
And I think the scripting, kind of came about to make people comfortable, right? Because I think a lot of the people who participated in our Twitter chat as featured guests have never tweeted, have never done anything like that before. So I think when they can see on a piece of paper, this is how it's going to go. We're going to tweet this question. You are going to tweet this response. It makes everyone more comfortable. I mean, I think that is, and then they're in there. And initially when we started doing the Twitter chats, we were all in the same room. So we would be in the room with the 3 other featured guests, and then they'd see all this happening on the screen and be like, this isn't so hard, we can do this. And they get very excited. So I think it takes something that maybe seemed kind of esoteric or scary and putting it on paper and saying, this is how it's going to go, made everyone, including, we, as Katya mentioned, we work for the federal government. So making everybody more comfortable that there's not going to be any rogue things going on,
That's a great point, Hope. And that goes to our moderators as well for the dialogue itself. Moderators get very nervous about how they should respond. So we actually, as part of our templates, we have suggested responses. And they feel comfortable knowing that they can just post like, thank you for your, idea, and help them structure a follow-up question. But as Hope said, it's very natural. And just like you would hear in a presentation, you write your presentation or your talking points, but as soon as conversation happens, it sort of takes over and you feel natural and you respond. And that's the same thing in the dialogues as well with our moderators. But everyone likes that structure to feel comfortable.
And we've brought a lot of people along who you would think would never do Twitter, would never do a dialogue. And I think that we've had a lot of people after they've seen them and participated be like, you know, on board. And we work for an agency that's very comfortable doing things in person, on paper, just not a huge social media comfortable place. And I think after taking these steps and doing it, I think they feel very comfortable. And we have every, you know, someone new on the call for the next dialogue every time who's like, oh yeah, I want to do one of these. So I think it's a process, but it's something that you can do with people who maybe aren't so comfortable with social media. I think this is something that they can manage and feel comfortable with.
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
Great question.
thank you. Thank you, Hope and Katya, for your presentation today, and to our reactors, Erica, Denise, and Jerry, and also to all the great questions that have come in through the chat box. Really great conversation today. So thank you. We'll see you in a little bit.